item 1, then we'll address minutes. And item 3 is the revised fiscal 23 budget. And then we'll set other meeting dates. Are there public comments?
I would like to suggest that we include my assessment discussion proposals in that, or is that appropriate at this time? Are we going to have another meeting on this budget?
We have room for other items. Typically, other items that aren't warned, we can't vote on, if I have that right. Part of the, well, we're due to set subsequent meeting dates anyway. That's been under there, because assessments aren't really part of this budget anyway, right?
Where are they going to take place?
I would guess we could continue the discussion on it during the budget presentation and figure out where it fits in.
Okay,
Does that work?
as long as it's going to come up.
No public comments?
Not seeing any.
Then we have to consider the minutes from the last meeting, which was December 7th.
I'll move them.
Motion from Fran,
I'll second them.
second from Leon. Is there discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I have one abstention for me. That's right.
None opposed? And Leon is an abstention,
Yeah.
and the motion carries. Minutes are approved. We're now looking at item 3, the revised fiscal 23 budget, which I think is your game.
I can make that bigger if those of you that are
Yeah,
at
you're
home
gonna-
or even in here, yeah. Better? I'm gonna go much bigger. It's, yeah, I'm gonna lose. some
No,
of it.
that's fine for me. I don't know about anybody else.
I got the copy from you, so.
Those of us that are ocularly challenged. Is that a word? Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So only a few changes from the previous version or draft 1 that we looked at 2 weeks ago. We did have some updates based on current staffing, so that is actually netting a small reduction in our salaries line. There was also a request at the SVU ESD level to add a intensive special needs specialist back in. If those of you that are on the SVU ESD board, if you recall last year, there was a request to add a licensed clinical social worker to be split between Molly Stark and Benel. Kind of as an offset to that, there was a reduction in an intensive special needs specialist supporting the Learner Support Center. That was a vacancy, so we actually, there was no reduction in force, but we ended up removing that from the budget. This year, the request is to actually put that back in. So this is quote unquote a local para, so that ends up being directly put into the SVUESD part of their assessment for direct instruction. So that actually has an impact on both the salaries and the benefits line. And those of you that are looking at a narrative too, I don't have it put up on the screen because there's so few changes. But if you are looking at a digital copy or a colored copy on the narratives, any changes are indicated in blue italics on the narrative. So that is, okay, so salaries. On the benefits line, there are a couple other changes there too. Right after the meeting that we had last time, there was a notice that came out from teacher retirement that the assessment that they charge for teachers that are new to the teacher retirement system. It's a fee that the employer pays. And it's just a flat assessment every year as a head count essentially. That is going up from $1,340 this year to $1,402 next year. So I went ahead and made that adjustment. So that kind of touches on several of the other, when we look at the function and departmental breakdown of the budget.
Could you remind us of where that headcount money goes? To whom do we pay it?
It's supporting the teacher retirement system, and they label it as a healthcare assessment. So I think it's trying to support the rising healthcare costs for the retired teachers. I did add the notation that we did receive notice that the dental rates for SVSU are remaining the same. And then if you recall a few years ago with the change in the healthcare plans and statewide bargaining, a number of our support staff weren't eligible to actually elect an employer paid benefit in excess of a single plan. So we had built factors in not knowing or not really sure what was going to happen. We made adjustments to this current year's budget. We still had a little bit of a factor in there just in case folks missed the open enrollment. But we've gone through 2 open enrollments since then, so I've reduced those factors. So that's a further reduction to the benefits line we're seeing there. I don't think we had any changes to contracted services line. The operations budget of 4, small increase there with the potential of the central office relocation. We will be using the sewer services of the town of Bennington if we are moving to the North Street location. Here, we're actually on a septic system, so we only have to pay to have that pumped every couple of years. So I did factor in an increase for water and sewer, and then small adjustments potentially for heat and electric, but just, if one's short, the other one's there in case, just not knowing. And then the other change from draft 1 to draft 2 is the transportation line. We did receive word from our transportation contracted service transportation provider. So it is due for who actually services SVSU previous member districts only. So it would be the Pownell, Shaftesbury, Woodford, Bennington areas. We are within what's allowable under statute to renew again. So the NEEP index came in at a 3.4% increase is the maximum allowable this year. He agreed to that. I was concerned in what I had in the previous budget that if we went out to bid, we'd probably be looking at a 5% at least increase. So I was able to slide that back because he did agree to extend it for an additional year.
How did they go to, if you chose a different contractor, how did they go to a 5%?
If we go out to bid, everything that we've had in the past gets thrown away and we start all over again.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, those are really the changes from draft 1. And you can see that brings us down slightly. We were at a 2.59% increase on draft 1 down to a 2.32% increase in draft 2. On the acronyms page, I did add a couple of other items there. Also have those in italics. CLA, which I haven't gotten yet from the Department of Taxes, is our common level of appraisal. So that's one of the factors that goes into tax rate calculations. DFR is the Department of Financial Regulation. That is the state organization that reviews and approves insurance rates. So as of right now, our health insurance rates are still in the proposed stage. They haven't officially been accepted by DFR. But we're thinking, and VHI is comfortable with what they've submitted, so that's what we have built in, is what they have proposed to that agency. And then NEEP, the NEEP index is the New England Economic Project, CPI, Cumulative Price Index, and that's one of the pieces of information that comes from the Agency of Education that I referenced with regard to contract extensions. So we have to make sure if we are extending a contract that we don't exceed that index, and that over the life of the contract, we haven't exceeded 30% of the original price. So we're still within that for transportation.
Common level of appraisal is expected to go down. Do I have that?
That's what people are
Yeah.
suggesting. But yeah, with the property sales and how high some of the homes have been selling for. Yeah, people are predicting that the CLAs will be lower, which essentially then drives your tax rate higher, right?
Oh, yeah.
So then if we take a look at the other version, which is the same budget, but instead of it being broken down by overall category, it takes all those categories and condenses it down into each of these functions. So you can actually see, departmentally, or, specifically like for special education, you can see all in all what that grouping is costing. So on the direct instruction line, that is a small increase, and that's mainly because of the request to add that intensive special needs specialist back in. The special education budget is a reduction from the last go round, partially because of that healthcare, the uncertainty that we had with health insurance and the support staff elections. But also there was a teacher of the deaf that we had allocated to that function. And it's more appropriate for us to carry that and report it in the 2151 down a little bit lower, which is the hearing impaired services. So that that position salary and benefits has been allocated to another portion of the budget. Let's see. Hearing impaired, I guess, is the other big one to note. So it's the 2151 hearing impaired services. So we pulled out of the 1201 special education for the teacher. And then there are two communications facilitators, which are, I guess, essentially interpreters for one-on-one services to the hearing impaired students that we have. And those were previously carried in the 2190 other support services. But again, because their role really does relate to hearing impairment, we took those out of the 2190 and rolled them into the 2151. So everything's still there, it's just reallocating.
As a general concept, we don't really have totally deaf students, correct?
These are students that are actually up in Arlington, so without the teacher being here, or administration specifically up there in the building, I wouldn't be able to answer that.
It was just a curiosity. I'm trying to get straight in my mind what kind of services.
We did years ago, like when I first started working here, we did have a student, we had to bring a teacher on, but I believe that student was a senior for that, so it was a one-year position for that person to be here. And that is really everything that I have for you tonight in terms of this budget and changes. Otherwise, we're pretty well set with any changes. Administration is good with what you have before you, so it would be back to the board if you folks are comfortable with it. The next step, I think we have it identified on the full meeting for a potential vote this evening. And if this budget passes, then the next step for my office would then be to allocate that out into, the assessments to the local districts, which I know Ray would like to talk about this evening. I'm not sure, well,
So where's the appropriate point to discuss assessments? I don't know that we have a problem with the budget necessarily, but
Right.
out of this budget has to, the assessment discussion has to.
I would get it more at the full board meeting.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right, given that
Because it
we
changes
have a very
assessment.
small group here.
Affect everyone, so.
Yeah.
so I guess I can open it for questions. I do have something to give you kind of under the other on our agenda, which I have handed out, but I think we've also got posted on the website as well.
Questions?
What happened to the audiologist for 2022, 23?
There have been a couple of times where we actually had costs that we allocated to the local budget. So if you look back across, the only thing you're actually seeing as a value there are some actual costs for FY20 and FY21. The audiology is supported through grants. So we use our Medicaid funding as well as the IDEA grant, the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So that is how that position and most of those services are funded. So she's definitely still here and very busy.
Other questions for Renee?
One more staff training went away. 2021 down from 2020. I would think we've been looking at trying to get more training in there some kind of way. As opposed to,
We do have quite a bit that we actually fund through the grants.
oh, we've been the grants we got.
Yep.
I keep forgetting about money coming from the
Yes.
COVID grant stuff, I guess. Is that
Yeah,
what-
so occasionally if we have, and see that's another good point, Leanne, that's kind of the same thing as audiology. So if we have some additional things that came up in FY20 and FY21 that weren't part of the grant, we ended up trying to reallocate some funds that we had locally to pay those costs.
So in Esther, it shows 36,000 instructional staff training.
You're jumping ahead.
And,
That was my other.
and back in the CFP, you have 160, almost 9,000.
Even more in ESSER too.
Okay, right.
Which goes away after,
Yeah, there's 500,000 there, 540.
So I don't know, Jackie has her hand up, so I don't know if she has a question on budget, and then I can pull up on the screen the grant information.
go ahead, Jackie.
Well, my question is really very simple. Have you also prepared a budget that would have no increases? In other words, level funded? The reason I ask this is because several board members will be asking the same question when it comes to a vote, because you're only leaving us with one choice. And in order to leave that with one choice, then we have to answer to the people in town who say, well, this is the only budget that we don't get to vote on. All the other budgets the town votes on, but not this budget. So I'm looking at it in terms of well, today's banner, promulgates you're going to rent spaces in downtown, and it also included the price. And then you look at this budget and people will toy them together and say, oh, so this is going to pay for the new space, and that's in their mind. And this is the questions I've been asked. And I said, no, actually, it doesn't pay for that. It pays for this, this, and this, but it includes that. So people are wondering if this includes and I know it does include the rental space, the projected rental space for the new area.
Correct.
And of course, this is the time of year when people are still stretching out, trying to pay for what they have and don't have. Affordable housing is very big on people's mind, and they can't afford the houses they live in. So do we really increase even by 2.5% or less than 2.5% our budget this year on the SVSU? Or will it come out in the wash as combined with all the other schools as not an increase, a level funding throughout? Was that too many questions?
No, I think what I can offer, Jackie, is that, so our collective bargaining units are set. The salaries have been negotiated. So all those increases to all the salaries have been built in here. I don't have any wiggle room on that. We would have to be looking at reduction in force if we were going to try to cut salaries. The benefits also too, that's pretty much dictated to us. Most of our employees elect the gold CDHP plan, and that has been proposed to the Department of Financial Regulation from VHI at a 5.2 or 5.4% increase. So 5.2% increase. So that premium potentially increasing there. I believe that the ESP negotiated a 1.5–2% increase on their salaries. Teachers are averaging 3.5%, 5% increase on health insurance, and we're only looking at a 2.5%, less than 2.5% increase overall. But if that's the desire of the board, I would have to go back to the directors, and we'd have to make cuts for sure.
And for comparison, last year's budget for the issue,
You asked me that last
I know.
time, and I don't have it
and
pulled up.
you gave it to me too, but
I want to say like 367, but I'm not sure. I will pull it up.
For the sake of argument, Renee, what would a 2% increase look like? Just an idea. I don't want you to have to.
three.
Well, $300,000 is going to be 1%, so a third of that would.
Okay.
Yeah. 33,000.
So, well, that I'm looking at, what happened to the legal services column?
I've level funded it, so there's no increase there.
Right. I see that, but I figured, what did we do back from 21 and into 22 and happen that way? Was that part of the SVSU combination with Allison, Sandgate, or whatever along that line?
The consolidation obviously costs more legal services going through also for negotiations, which we had been in like a constant cycle of them. That adds to our cost too.
So in 2021, that's what we got covered.
I think what I saw was 688,000 would level fund, correct?
Yes.
So is there any wiggle room on anything else? But I mean, I certainly would like to vote for your move, but I do know that the move, just the rent alone will include just so much money, but people will say, oh, look at all the money that they spent on this building, when they could have level funded this. And
I
so,
think, Jackie, I'll say the point of staying in this building will cost far more money than what that rent will cost.
well, I know that, and you know that, but
And that's why I'm saying it for anybody who's listening and wants to hear the budget, and that I think should be the response that board members should say when asked. It's the estimate, and that estimate is now 2 years old, was $3.6 million to bring this building into compliance. Now that's the real reality we're facing, the real cost we're facing. This is an economical move, I believe, to move to a building that will already be in compliance rather than to renovate this one.
Jim, what would the biggest thing that has to be done here
an elevator so that the square footage on the second floor can be used, and there's no bathrooms down there, and the ramp would have to be reconfigured so that it'd be an enclosed ramp. It's just an open ramp right now. Bathrooms up here would have to be renovated and widened doorways,
Okay.
ventilation, there's no ventilation in the building.
Next question is, how long, has anybody said we gotta get out of here now?
No.
Okay, my point being is to buy some time. I understand what you said, and I understand this guy wants to rent his building out and all that stuff too. He says he has a lot of other people that want to get that. I don't know. I take it with a grain of salt, but if we had, I'm just throwing this out, I don't know if we do or not. If we have 2 years, 3 years, I don't know. How quick does this have to be done? Is the state telling you they're gonna come down here, you gotta get the hell out of here, or what exactly is, okay. So my point is, and I asked you at one meeting if anybody looked at the Energizer offices here. I did, I talked with the people, and they want to sell the whole thing, 7 million, so they're not interested in leasing anything. But that would be perfect down there where their offices are. It's got an elevator, it's got parking, it's got everything. And the rooms, the conference rooms. But I don't know, I wanna.
We remember, we can't buy property.
No, I know that,
Unless somebody buys that and wants to renovate it.
Now, my other
At least
point
it
is the town of Bennington's looking at the Energizer building for housing and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Jesus, too bad, maybe the town ought to buy that, we lease it from the town, the office park, which is already there, parking lots, everything, elevators, the whole 9 yards. So I don't know, it's just a thought, we look more, and I don't think there's anybody gonna come here waiting to swoop up our buildings, and so I really don't. But that's just my opinion, and I've talked to other people, and I know we gotta get out of here, but my point is, we need to buy some time. I just don't see, I mean, that rent is gonna be, what, 128,000 a year, or whatever it is? We're going from 35,000, this building, I get it.
Mhm.
At one of the meetings, it was said it was gonna cost us 68,000. Now we're at 128,000. How the hell high is this gonna be? And I know I guess it's a 3-year, beginning 3-year lease or something. I don't know, I think we ought to, as they say, pause a little bit and see, and I know you guys done some work, I get it. But I just think, I mean, we got central office, we got Spinelli Field, Jesus, we got so many things going on, and it's just, I don't see us being able, I mean, I want to make sure we pass budgets, but if we start going this whole rule, I just don't see them pass it. But it's just my opinion, and I don't want to see Renee spend time on going back through this budget if they go down, and now we got to find out where the hell we going to cut, and she's just said, there's not much wiggle room to cut, and to get it down to about 2% or level fund it, it's $688,000. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
So let's say this level fund is a concept, right? that
No, I
people
know.
Like to hear it. We're level
I
funded the
know, I
budget.
know.
There's no such thing as a level funded budget. If you level fund it, you are cutting something, right? And
Yeah, no, I know.
and things do cost more. And
Yeah.
the schools are certainly seeing and dealing with things in the past 2 years that are impacting budgets that we've never had to deal with before.
Yep.
And we're seeing inflation like that we haven't seen.
Oh, yeah,
in many
40 years. Yeah, the
So
last 40 years.
2.3% increase, I think is commendable for what it's coming in at, facing those challenges that we know that we're
I know,
facing.
I know.
Level funded budget, 6% increase.
Say that again, Scott?
I said a level funded budget is a 6% increase by these days.
Well,
So you mean, you're saying factoring in inflation?
Inflation,
Keep it
cost of
level
living
fund-
index, all
Well,
correct.
I would say, Scott, that a level service budget has a 6% increase, could potentially, if we wanted to, if you factor in inflation, what you're doing for that year could cost you the same. It could cost you 6% more.
Correct.
So I apologize. I pulled up the wrong budget last
Okay.
time to tell you that it was a 3.67% increase. That was the SVU ESD budget
Okay,
last year. The SVSU last year was a 0.09% decrease.
Yeah,
all right.
I kind of remember it was really.
Was-
So we're making maximum use of the budget monies that are in these consolidated federal grants, IDAB, and
Allowable uses.
yes, or allowable uses
Yeah.
that can be taken out of this budget. You've made those calculations and you're using that as maximally as you can.
Correct. And another thing, just to clarify, Fran, we were working towards a potential lease at 210 South Street. So I had increased the budget last year or the year before, it's been going on so long, to $60,000. So the budget that you have before you already had that 60 in there. So this year's increase is 68 to get us to that 120.
The 120, okay. There's no other funds out there, ESSER, nothing we can use for anything else, any kinds of funds anywhere. I don't know what the hell you want to call them. Just extra money someplace if there's any. Is the state gonna give us anything? I mean, I just, I know, just trying to grab straws, I guess.
ESSER two, when does that start?
It has started,
It
all
started
of the
already.
ESSER funds, yep.
Yeah.
Would you like me to pull that up
Well,
on the
it's
screen?
got 285,000 for 286,000 for building operations, but that's not referring to central office operations.
No, the building wasn't eligible for it.
Right. So that's for school building operations. So there's no money there for the move.
No.
And none of these other ESSER one doesn't have that kind of money.
Right, so the funds or the monies that we've had allocated to the 2,600, and I guess I can pull this up so folks at home know what I'm doing.
ESSER grants are all focused on students and operations in buildings. Right?
So what Ray is referring to, wow, every time I go to try to zoom this in, it disappears. There are 4 grant PDFs that I had posted with the budget, tonight's budget agenda. One is the consolidated federal programs. Fail me. See, I took my computer off my dock and it's lost its mind. So, well, ESSER 2 is up, so I can share this one. So all of the ESSER funds have date back to March of 20. ESSER 1 funds we have through September 30th of 22 to spend those funds. Pull that one up either. So I'll go through ESSER 2 and then I'll try to reconnect my computer and share that again. ESSER 2 gives us funding through September 30th of 23. And then the ARP ESSER or ESSER 3 funds, which I have not included here because we don't have access to those funds yet. The Agency of Education has submitted their state plan to the U.S. Department of Ed. It, as of last Wednesday, had not yet been approved, so those funds have not been released to the agency. Once they are, they will open up for us to then be able to submit applications. But the ESSER 2 funding that Ray was looking at here is this the 2,600 building operations and the $285,000 that we have in our current application for ESSER 2 is covering things such as face masks, cleaning supplies, that type of operational
Yep.
expense with regard to COVID
And
response.
would not include, would it include money for ventilation changes?
We do not have that in ESER 2. We're planning to use our third
Three.
bucket of money.
That would be ESER 3.
Correct.
So none of that's available for dropping our sort of operating expenses of the SU for physical plant.
I think it would be a challenge for us to get the agency to approve that.
Yeah, no, I got that because
That we're not
it's focused
supplanting.
on making up for the losses that children had over this COVID period. Really, that's where the focus should be. But I mean, you know, you look at it and there are generous pots of money. There's, of course, I don't exactly understand the overlaps of timelines for these things.
It's been a challenge because typically they don't do that. They run on a fiscal year, so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But, you know, you've got, yeah, there's $12 million sitting on the table here. It's probably more. If I'm not just looking at the first number.
One of the things we're looking at is work that folks have to do as part of recovery. And some of the damage that's been done as a result of the pandemic, whether it's social, emotional, or educational.
Academic losses. Yeah.
Academic losses, we're trying to address recovering our positions. And I guess I'm worried about if we start reducing the budget by means of staffing, that's going to pay a price that we don't want to pay. The other thing I worry about is we're prone to kick the can down the road often. One of my major concerns is building maintenance, and we have done that for so many years, and we now have an emergency that we have to address with building ventilation. And part of the reason we're going to be assuming large costs in that is because we haven't done our due diligence over the course of the few years. The same concern applies to what happens with new quarters. And I don't think it's going to be cheaper next year. I agree with where Fran is trying to go. I just don't know how to.
Yeah, and I also know that, you know, everything goes up, but there comes a point when people are gonna raise their hands up, hey, we've had enough. I mean, it just gets ridiculous. And I fault the state itself for not, I mean, we have buildings, yeah, that we need to get into, or whether we renovated this or not. And they've never funded a damn thing it's almost maybe 30% when they should be funding 70 or 80%, but they don't do that. Other states do. But it's such a hardship on the people in this town. I don't care, I'm not talking about Bennington, and I'm talking Shasberry, North Bennington. You know, you have people come up to you and they're in tears, for Christ's sake. You're in a grocery store. See, what can we do? You know, there's not a whole lot other than try to hold the line and stuff, do the best we can. And I'm worried about the kids. I'll tell you, what's been going on the last 2 years, 2.5 years, it drives me crazy, but it's what in hell are we going to do? There isn't enough money to go around. So what do? We got to do something. And I don't like cutting, but I have to tell you, if we want to expect to pass our budgets this year, we better look at something. And I don't know what. I don't know where we go for extra. We call somebody in the state. What do? There's got to be some way to get some money so we can concentrate on the kids, definitely. But I'm just worried about, like I say, if we don't pass budgets, where does Renee go when the budget goes down the toilet? And we already know that we're in trouble, but see, I don't want to get to that point, and I don't know how we get out of it, and maybe we can't, I don't know.
I think we also, had an awakening when the MAU field wasn't passed. And it wasn't just, I mean, there were a lot of supporters of football and soccer and all the people who were going to use that field. But they just said, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. And I had just one little idea, and it'll probably, you'll probably say, no, that couldn't happen. But if we, in two schools that have the highest amount of students who are in special ed, and I know I've talked to Jim about this before, if we could assign special ed teachers to all those classrooms to teach in conjunction, in other words, 2 teachers in a classroom for those classes who have so many special ed students in them and are concentrated in them. And it would shift some of the special ed money into the school because we would call them teachers. So to be a double teaching position, or 2 teachers in one classroom, but one teacher would be a special ed person and the other person would be a regular teacher. I would almost like to do it with these ESSER funds to see if we could also use those funds and help those struggling students. I mean, this is what it's all about, is our students. We want to pay money for our students and for them to have success. So if we could double team in those concentrated schools, maybe we could raise it up. The average amount of students in a school is 14% special ed, and our average, I think, is 23, 24. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's up 10%, but it's not all of our schools. It's just the average of all of our schools. So if we just doubled up on some of those teachers, took them out of the special ed category, placed them in a school category, would that help? I don't know. It's just a thought I had.
We're going to talk under the superintendent's report at the full meeting tonight. There is a presentation on the supports that have been put in for our students using ESSER funds. So rather than repeat it all now, we'll be discussing that. It's not part of the budget, but it's part of the superintendent's report on what the supports that we are, and that includes what ESSER funds are supporting. Let's remember what we were saying about ESSER funds. We do not want to hire for positions that then we cannot maintain once the funds have run out. So we will address some of the things that Jackie, you were just talking about, and also about, the struggle that we have in filling some of these positions too. So it's one thing to put a position in the budget. It's another thing to get it filled with a qualified candidate.
Well, the reason I just say this is because for the last, I don't know, maybe 8 years, or it could be shorter, it could be longer, we haven't moved those numbers. We haven't gotten kids out of the special ed cycle. They go almost from kindergarten to 12th grade, and not all of them are severe. And I'm sure their parents would rather keep them in special ed, but and some parents wouldn't. But why do those numbers stay the same? And I remember at one meeting, Charlie, forgot his last name, but he asked this question too. Why aren't we reducing the numbers? And this would be one way of reducing the numbers, by taking those kids, giving them, especially the K-3 kids, giving them double the amount of people to help them at that point. I know we can't include, we can't give them smaller rooms because we don't have any more rooms. So, but concentrating our efforts in those K-3 classrooms so that this kind of breaks the cycle and allows kids to get out of special ed if they can. It's just my thought.
Other questions for Renee?
I have one, Dick. Maybe if you put a budget together that level funds, okay? You give it to our legislators to see this is where we're at. And see if they can do anything upstate for extra funds. I don't know. It's just a thought. Maybe it's a stupid question, but I just gotta be some way we can get the state to get off their duffs and do something else and get some money in here.
I mean, the education funding system is what it is, right? I
Yeah.
can tell you that with Act 173, the funding for special education is shifting for next year. So I think we're actually going to see probably a reduction in many of our special education assessments based on that funding. It does have me and my staff a little bit concerned because we don't know, we're cutting the budget and they're going to give us more money for special education. I mean, it's a shift, right? But I don't know if, the legislation was intended to do X, but it's actually doing Y.
Well, it's funny, and this is more political than anything else. We worry about programs, about the goddamn frogs or the snails to cross the road. So we put a culvert and stuff in there because it costs millions of dollars to do. And we got a real serious problem here with our students that have lost actually a couple of years. Okay, and maybe they're going to lose a third one. I hope the hell not. But this is what the state does. All these stupid programs that you don't need. This is what we should be doing is right here, these kids. And we just keep doing stupid things every year with these damn programs you don't need. Yeah, I'm just frustrated. We come here every year. We do these budgets. We almost know what's going to happen in the end, and we just keep doing it. It's like there's nothing else you can do. You just got to keep doing it. So I don't know, but
Back to the special ed money. I'm somewhat confused by what you said. Is it going up the total amount for this SU?
Right. Yes.
That's the indication.
Yes.
Right.
Because
So-
it's based on ADM. It's a
Right.
census block grant now instead of the
Right.
way that they have.
But does, how much flexible, it's supposed to be a more flexible program, right? But how much flexibility does it allow? I mean, Jackie has, I think, an interesting idea, but is that flexibility there in the program to put that teacher in K-3 classrooms with children that are under IEPs? Because that teacher could work with a group that has a non-special ed child in it or two at a certain size range, right? 2 or 3 in a group, right? Without penalty. That's one of the flexibilities that's allowed in the 173 program, as I understand it. Now, I'm not an expert, so we got the expert in the meeting, right?
That would be Kate's
Kate,
question.
yeah. But she's muted.
I always wait till Jim calls on me.
Well, this is a budget meeting, so I don't know if those are discussions for the general meeting and we move on the budget.
Yeah. Well, the question is whether that's feasible and whether it actually reduces our budget.
It's not going to reduce the budget.
Not going to reduce.
No, if we add positions, that number's going up.
But if we shift those, I think the idea was shifting positions in the classrooms. Maybe there would be additional positions. You've got additional money, you might be able to support some additional teachers to be in the classroom as special ed teachers working with small groups.
That model does exist, that we already are doing that in some classes.
Right. Yeah, well, if it's not going to, I mean, If it doesn't adjust this number
Salary.
on this budget, it could be done without, it could still be done. It just isn't going to help us with this budget, is what you're saying. And Kate, you had something to say?
Or Jayla.
Jayla?
Jayla.
Okay, sorry. I didn't.
Yeah, sorry. I was just making, I guess the point like would be shifting, like we're still paying the salary. It's just a matter of where that teacher is. So how would that necessarily reduce the budget, I guess was my question.
Well, the special ed funding is, some of that's coming from the state. Based on a global budget that's constructed for this SU, constructed for global budget for the state, and then each SU has its global budget that there's a little bit more flexibility in how it's spent and the conditions under which it's spent.
Right. So are we saying that we would not categorize those teachers as,
No, I think they would still be categorized that way, but they
Right.
could be used in a little bit more. They could be used in a regular classroom. In the
and that would replace a non-special ed teacher? I guess I'm confused on where the,
There'd be two
No,
teachers in the classroom. One of them is a special ed teacher who's doing help with students who have IEPs, but other students can be involved
right.
as long as it's within the.
Which is a model that we are using. We
Right.
are,
They already currently do that, right?
yeah. If you,
Right.
I was in a classroom last week that had 4 adults in the room.
More adults.
Yeah. When you add in support staff, teacher, special education teacher in there, that's not an unusual model to find.
And do we have evidence that that's helping with those students, for those students? Of course, COVID is kind of hacking away at any progress all the time.
You have some input on this, Elizabeth?
Oh, no, I was just saying that is exactly how we do it at Benel. We have some very skilled special educators. What comes to my mind is our kindergarten special educator, Deb Guyden. She is in the classroom constantly circulating through, doing groups, helping in there, helping with social skills. We also, all of our special educators are phenomenal. And we even have ones that have gone to the next above and beyond. I have a special educator doing lunch groups that I was fortunate enough to be able to observe the other day, where they were talking about effective communication and how to disagree respectfully to help these to help everyone be able to focus. And they really do focus on that 80-20. So we try very hard to strive to that model. That was all I was just agreeing.
Other questions? Concerns? Where are we? Would we like to address a vote on this budget?
Recommended to the full board, and the vote is scheduled, if there is one, at the full board meeting, not this meeting.
Okay.
But the question is, do you have a recommendation at the full board?
The recommendation be coming out of here.
Right.
Right. So we are the budget committee. Do we have a recommendation? That's the question.
I have another question.
Oh, Jackie.
Yes, and I'll keep it short if I can. I heard Renee say that we're going to get more money for special ed through the state. So if that comes to us, and we've already done our budget and approved our budget, it doesn't reduce our budget, and it just adds to it, correct?
Well, so if the budget that we have before us now, we have a template that's come from the Agency of Education telling us what they're estimating our special education census block grant will be. I've taken that and I've broken it out by individual member district of the SU. I'm going to apply that money to offset the expenses to each district.
So is that $688,000?
No, it's not.
It is not that much.
The increase is not $680,000.
How much is it?
Our census block grant is just over 7.6 million, which is an increase of actually a couple $100,000 over the average of what we've received for the past 3 years.
Okay, but that does get factored into the revenue side.
Correct.
So this 2.232% is still subject to the revenue calculation.
Absolutely.
And the holdover funds that you have,
Mhm.
the surpluses you have in the budget for various particular funding. So we aren't seeing the net increase.
No, you'll see those in your local budgets.
That's in our local budget.
Yep.
And you have an idea what that looks like.
I haven't run those numbers yet because I
Yeah,
didn't
you don't have all
know
the
what was
information.
going to happen with the budget. And then
Right.
if there was going to be a shift in how those assessments were calculated. So I wanted some direction
Right.
before we went through
Yeah,
that work.
gotcha.
So if we approve this budget tonight, is there a hope and a wish that it goes down?
This budget will be this budget if it's passed tonight as is.
Right.
What will then happen is then I'll take that and I'll build that into our assessment spreadsheet, which
Yep.
takes the special education funding along with any fund balances that we have rolling over from previous years that offsets the cost. And then that net cost is what gets built into the MAU budget and the SVU ESD budget and the Arlington budget and the North Bennington budget. And
So-
Sandgate.
Do you know what the total of those surpluses is?
We don't have our audits yet. We have run
Are
the
we gonna have
numbers.
those in before?
Yeah, so
approved
essentially
budget?
we've run the numbers, so we have a
Yeah,
pretty
I
good
mean, it's
indication
your-
as to
it's your
what
work
we
that
are.
they're going
Yeah.
through. Right.
But I
We have the
tend,
numbers, but they're not certified by the
Yeah.
auditor.
we err on the side of, being a little conservative and not using every penny, but
Yeah.
the money's there and we're confident that it's
Well, do you
there.
have a rough idea that you feel confident of? I mean, you could go a little low. I'm just
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would be ready to give you all your local budgets at the beginning of January with assessments that will be covered.
Well, the question is for those local districts, what their budget increase from the SU is going to be, or if it is going to, because of various factors, extra special ed money and rollover surpluses, going to be effectively zero or close to it. That's my question. And I think that would be persuasive to people like Fran and any public listening, if we know that we come much closer to a zero increase once you factor in revenue. I'm not getting a response.
Well, it's hard for me to say, right? Like if I were
Yeah.
to use the equalized pupil methodology that we've used
Yeah.
before, I could run those numbers and tell you then. But if we're going to shift how those
Well,
assessments.
I'm
are
just talking about a
calculated,
rough number. Is it in this range? The 687, or is it much below it? What range is it of surpluses and expected additional revenue in special ed? You said there's $200,000 or $300,000 in special ed. So that's happening, almost. Of course, it won't all get spent, most likely next year. Some of it will end up as surplus again, but at the moment, it's pledged to such special ed expenses. Of course, that doesn't, you then have to factor in the other elements at the particular point where they fit in the budget, because there are particular funds that are created and not expended.
I'm not trying to be difficult. It's so complicated. Like
I know
everything is
People
broken
tend to
out.
remember the first number they hear. And then if that number changes, then, it puts her in an awkward position where you say, well, this is the
Yeah, no,
the number you gave.
I'm looking for a spitball. And
Our auditors, when they looked at our assessment sheet, they're like, why do you have this broken
Yeah, right.
out to a sheet this big when you could have it like this? Mm-mm.
Okay, well,
I'm just trying to pull up.
I was
the
trying to be
census
helpful
block.
by pulling some idea here out for the people who really, friends. Yeah, that's his role on this board. He's to be a kind of a question about where's the money coming from? Yeah. So I'm trying to provide a solution for it.
I'm waiting for the census block grant template to open, but my screen has gone completely black.
Well, if we have, as a committee, we have to make a recommendation to the SVSU. So the full board, all of us present have to contribute to that. I think we're spinning our wheels here for the time being, so
Yeah.
we have to make a recommendation or not. So we would need a motion to that effect, one way or the other.
Well, I'm going that we accept, recommend the budget SVSU at a 2.32 as indicated on the documents that for our next meeting is what we think is our best shot. Well, SVSU.
So Leon's made the motion to recommend the 2.32 budget. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I was Shayla second.
Jayla seconded.
I'll let her second.
Is there further discussion regarding this?
Census block grant for the projected for FY23 over the average funding that we've had for the past 3 years is an increase of $341,000.
Which would effectively
Reduce your special education assessments and your local district budgets.
So we would show a net decrease.
Yeah, it sounds like we could come close. I don't know where we're gonna end up really, but, depending on the district, you'd be close to a much smaller increase. And is that, the person we're dealing with here is Fran, really.
You have to deal with me. That's your.
No,
I have an opinion, I say it. That's the way it is.
You are the person who is, and justifiably so concerned about these numbers and how the public is going to take them.
Is there any other contribution from other board members? No other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the budget currently at 2.32% increase, specify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Did I hear a second nay?
Yes.
Jackie and Fran. Abstentions? None. I believe that motion carries. And this is a recommendation to the full SVSU board from the budget committee. Any idea when those numbers would be ready from the special ed funds, the grant funds, what you were trying to say was offsetting the bond, the line?
Oh, our fund balances are really, it's from the audit. And we've run the numbers, so we have a pretty good indication. And the conversations that we've had with the auditors, I don't foresee them finding anything that would require us to make any significant adjustments that would be impactful going forward.
After all, they rely on your figures, and your figures have always been.
It has been challenging getting information out of the system, though.
We are looking at setting subsequent meeting dates.
You will
We
need
need that,
if the budget isn't passed by the full board, you will need to set a date.
but
If it's passed by the full board, you're set.
we don't need anything else related to the budget. Assessments will be discussed in the full board meeting.
Not there.
In that case, any other items for the committee? Seeing none, motion to
So move.
adjourn, motion by Fran,
Second.
second Ray, those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries, we are adjourned.